You are listening to the Techie Leadership Show with Bogdan and Andrei.
Hello and welcome to the Techie Leadership Show. Today with me I have Dennis Snow. He has a passion for service excellence and has consulted with organizations around the world on the subject. His customer service abilities were born and developed over 20 years with Walt Disney World. In his last year with Disney World, his leadership performance was ranked in the top 3% of the company's leadership team. 3%. That's impressive, and it's a big company.
That is a big
Dennis,
company.
yes. Dennis is now a full-time speaker, trainer, and consultant, and is dedicated to helping organizations achieve their goals in the areas of customer service, employee development, and leadership. He is also the author of 2 best-selling business books, Lessons from the Mouse and Unleashing Excellence. Great titles for the books. I think I love more the one about the mouse.
Yeah, that one tends to resonate with people. They sometimes people don't get the Disney connection, but most of the time they do. Yeah.
Well, if they think about a regular mouse,
Right.
well, they think, what lessons does the real mouse have?
Well, Walt Disney, when he was still alive, toward the end of his life, he would remind his staff. He said, "Let's never forget that it all started with a mouse." And that was a pretty good philosophy. Yeah, very humble beginnings.
Did you get to meet Walt?
No, never did. Walt died in 1966, so I was still pretty young at that point. But there are a lot of people still, that I know that did work with Walt. And one of my favorite things is just sitting down and asking a question and just sitting back and letting them share
enjoying the answer.
Walt's stories of working with Walt Disney. That's a real pleasure.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And Dennis, do you want to add anything else about yourself, or are you all set?
My background, I was going to college and needed a summer job. And so my dad reminded me how much I loved Disney World when I was a child. We had visited Disney World when I was a child. So he said, "Why don't you drive down to Florida?" We lived up in Vermont, up in the northern part of the country. And he said, "Why don't you go down and see if you can get a job at Disney World?" So I did. And I worked at an attraction. It's not there anymore, called 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. I was Captain Nemo, driving the submarines. And to this day, that's still the best job that I have ever had. I just fell in love with the place. And so what was going to be a 3-month career, 3-month job, turned into a 20-year career. And so I got into management and managed various operating areas and was with the Disney University and the Disney Institute. And it was a wonderful, just a fabulous 20-year career, and really set the stage for what I do now, is speaking and training and consulting all about customer experience. That's everything that I focus on. And so that Disney background just provided a wonderful foundation for what I do now. Being Captain Nemo is still the best job that I've ever had.
Still the best job.
That's right.
See, sometimes like jobs that everybody is hunting with prestige and offices and everything, sometimes they're not the best jobs. Sometimes driving a submarine is better.
Driving a submarine that didn't really go underwater. So.
Well, Dennis, I'm really curious about your stories. So let's get into them. What is the biggest leadership success story you've witnessed personally?
Yeah, there's so many, from my Disney days and from when I doing the work that I do now. But probably, one of the best leaders that I ever had was a lady by the name of Valerie Oberly, and she was the vice president of the Disney University and then the Disney Institute. And we were going through a lot of changes. There were a lot of changes being made to the Disney Institute and what we were doing, and the business model was changing. And Valerie exhibited the ideal leadership traits that you would want in any type of challenging situation, which so many organizations are going through right now. A lot of challenge. Where she set the vision, on where it was a broad vision, but on where we needed to go. And it was still evolving, in her mind and everybody's mind, but she really kind of set the vision, and then saw her role as providing the team, of which I was a part, with what they needed to be successful. So she removed roadblocks. She allowed us to make mistakes, and we made plenty of them.
That's a big deal.
Yeah. And so, she was comfortable with risk, and letting us do those things. She was very appreciative. She gave the credit to her team rather than taking credit for herself. And so when I look back at my experiences over the years, her leadership style was exactly what we needed at that point. And what she ended up doing was building a very entrepreneurial culture within a much, the Disney organization, of course, is huge. You think about the size of the place. So we were just a part of it. And she created this very entrepreneurial culture that people were enthusiastic. They, looked forward to coming to work, felt respected, felt appreciated, felt like it was okay to take calculated risks. So that was probably the story that stands out best for me amongst a lot of stories. And that was 24 years ago. And I remember it like it was yesterday. So that's how powerful it was.
Yes, and what was the impact on the business by all this change, having this entrepreneurial culture?
Well, there was a number of positive impacts. First, from a financial standpoint, in terms of business coming in, we were highly successful. And what really showed me that it was working was the amount of repeat business that we were getting and referral business that we were getting. That's always, a sign that you're doing something right, that you're doing something right. The retention of the team, that people wanted to be there. And so when you looked at they call their employees cast members at Disney World. When we would do cast member surveys, the Disney University and then the Disney Institute, which came out of that, consistently rated very, very high in terms of cast member engagement. And so all of those metrics that you would look at, from a financial standpoint, from a customer or guest satisfaction standpoint, and from an employee or cast member standpoint, those three things are really kind of the best metrics on how you're doing, all so, ranked so high. And I always look back at those years as Camelot. Everything just sort of came together and just worked so well. And if I talk to any of my former colleagues from those days, and we do these Zoom meetings together, together, we all feel exactly the same way. This many years later, we all feel that was a moment in time for us in the organization. And I attribute it to Valerie Oberle. I attribute it to her leadership of the organization.
So even after all these years, you Knights of the Table still meet on the Zoom table.
Yeah. And, sometimes we meet at a coffee shop, but lately one of our friends has started doing these Zoom cocktail hours on Monday afternoons.
Oh, nice.
And so a bunch of us, and so we actually are closer now than we have been over since we all left, because we're getting together all the time now over these Zoom calls. So it's been really nice.
That just shows the quality of the relationships that Valerie emboldened to create. So not just towards her, but also for the team members. And there are people that might be apprehensive about emboldening like a more entrepreneurial mindset inside teams. because some leaders want more of the micromanagement style, force, command and conquer.
Yeah, and I've had leaders
they,
like that too. And I've had leaders like that as well. And I think different leadership styles can be appropriate for different time frames, in what's happening in the organization. But this was the perfect leadership approach for that time. And again, it set the tone for a tremendous amount of success and a tremendous amount of engagement for the team. And I think that's always the sign of a good leader is whether you like the leader or not, if you are engaged in what you're doing and you feel respected, you're going to do your best. So it's not about personality. And I think that's an important distinction to make too. It's not about personality, because there can be 100 different personalities and 100 different leaders, but if they're doing those core things right, setting their people up for success, recognizing them, showing appreciation, that's what matters. The personality part of it, some people are cheerleaders, some people are reserved,
yes,
it's what you do that makes the difference.
exactly. And it's not, there are several paths to achieve the same goal. So you can find stuff that applies to your own personality. Don't try to change your personality to be a better leader. Do stuff that works for yourself. And
I know one of your previous guests that you had, Lee Cockrell, he was a fantastic leader at Disney. If you talk to people who worked with Lee, they will have this same type of conversation as they reflect on Lee's leadership style, and just how he would be out in the park and he would be interacting with people. How can we do things better? I was so glad when I saw that you had him on your show, because I thought, okay, yeah, he's a good person to learn from. I learned a lot from Lee.
I also learned a lot from Lee, and he was amazing on his interview and shared so much value.
Yeah.
But getting back to it, Dennis, you made like a mention, and I'm really curious. You said like sometimes there are moments in time in the lifetime span of a business or for department when micromanagement or having more of a hard hand can be a beneficial style of leadership. Can you tell me when that would be the case?
Yeah, I think that there are times when, and I don't want to say hard-handed, but more of because I want to put this in a positive light.
Yes.
Right now, in so many organizations, they're dealing with tremendous safety issues, as people are coming back into an organization. And so in those types of cases, there have to be non-negotiables, that in order to protect our customers, in order to protect our people, there are certain things that we are going to have to do. And as leaders, we need to be willing to get in there. And again, I'm struggling with the term micromanage, but let's just use that. When it comes to, those are just such critical issues right now that we have to focus in on those things and make sure that we're doing things correctly, because otherwise the consequences for a business, the consequences for people in general are extreme. So that's where I would say that, there are times when different leadership approaches can be appropriate. We just have to make sure we're matching up the right approach for the right time period. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. If you have like the possible situation of a life and death occurrence inside the business.
Many cases, that's what's happening right now, and so I think it's, the term is situational leadership. And I think that's a very good term, that we have to decide what's the best approach right now. But as an umbrella over everything, I think that the things that we've been talking about in terms of setting the vision and showing appreciation and encouraging risk taking and those types of things. As a broad umbrella, those really work in just about any
Yes.
business situation. But we need to be willing to make the adjustments based on what's happening.
Yeah, and just think about it. For example, people that working on fixing the airplanes, you would want their managers to be more hands-on with them, and don't say like, "Oh, we encourage a little risk-taking and failure. It's not a problem for us." Or people working in power plants. So there are situations where, but for most, especially in most tech situations, you don't have something like that.
But that's a very good example. Yeah. We don't want to encourage risk taking when somebody's working on an airplane.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Dennis, since we're talking about potential failures, what is the biggest leadership failure you had the unfortunate experience of witnessing?
I was invited to speak at a launch of a patient experience program for a hospital, and they were doing a big rally, and they were pulling all of the hospital team members together, and they were launching this initiative that they were putting in place all around patient experience. So I had been trying to reach out to the hospital's CEO to talk with him about, okay, what's your vision for this, and what are you hoping people come away from my part of it? And I was just doing a speech to help with the launch. Couldn't get a hold of him. Never returned my phone calls. Couldn't connect with him. So finally, about 5 minutes before it was supposed to start, I was up at the hospital, and we were in the big auditorium.
Getting ready to go on the stage.
And he finally came in, and he was going to kick everything off. And I said, "How are you doing?" And he looked me dead in the eye and said, "I would be doing a whole lot better if I didn't have to waste my time on things like this."
Oh my God.
I know. And I just froze. I really didn't know what to say. I thought, well, just cancel all of this, because if that's the feeling. So he got up and gave his talk, and it was very uninspiring. But what I noted was all of the executives also had a role to play in this launch. And they'd obviously designed this program to get people excited, to get their people excited and engaged. And so they were playing music and trying to get people up dancing, trying to get people shouting, are you ready to go with this? And the audience was just very reserved, very, they weren't buying into it at all. You could see they just had this, let's wait and see how long this lasts. And that starts at the top, doesn't it?
Yes.
That really starts at the top. So that statement of I would be doing a whole lot better if I didn't have to waste my time on things like this, that set the tone for the whole organization. And so that was probably the most vivid leadership failure that stands out to me.
And I guess that program flopped.
Oh yeah. And it was one of those things that I could tell. I could tell, okay, because any program or initiative, there's a launch to it. Okay.
Yes.
And that's where you can, you do the build up and all of that. But at some point, unless senior leadership is highly engaged and highly supportive when it's not working, okay? Because in any initiative, there's a point where it feels like it's not working, right?
It always not works in the beginning.
Right. It's like cleaning out your garage, and you pull everything out, and you're like, oh my God, what have I done? There's a point
it's
where
more mess than it was before.
Exactly, and that's what happens with any initiative, and that's where you need somebody that is, the commitment is there, the energy is there. We're going to get through this. We're going to work together on this. And I knew that wasn't going to happen in this case, and it didn't. And it didn't. So that's the one that really. So here you have Valerie Oberly, my leader from Disney, and then this example, and they're just two opposite extremes.
And that's something that's really important. If you aren't inspired, you cannot inspire people. It
Right.
just because they can tell. They look at you, they see you, they say like this person is not. They say the words, but I can tell they're not. They don't mean them. They're not
Yeah.
true.
One of my favorite photographs is a photo that I have, and the quality of the photo isn't very good, but it was taken probably around 1959, and it was Walt Disney in Disneyland in California. And
Yes.
one of the parts of the Disney culture is keeping the place clean. That's one of the top compliments that Disneyland and Disney World gets, is how clean the place is. And one of the reasons is everybody picks up trash. Every cast member, part of your
Yes.
job is to keep the place clean. So there's a photo of Walt Disney in Disneyland, and he's picking up trash off the ground.
Ah.
And you think about walking the talk, and the way I like to think about that is, imagine a new hire at Disneyland going through training, and he or she is with the trainer, and the trainer says it's important to keep the place clean. Okay. And then they look over, and there's Walt Disney picking up trash off the ground. I thought,
Yes.
training doesn't get any better than that. That just says it all. So, again, I think one of the important traits of a strong leader, of a great leader, is they truly do walk the talk. They demonstrate the values in action, and not just a poster that they put up on the wall.
Exactly. And talking about walking the talk and training, I think it will be like even more powerful if the person doing the training actually shows up, like not without prompted, or make like, if they see something that they say during training, you have to do this, and the people in the training see the trainer doing it out of their own, then they say like, this is for real. This is not just so we spend some time here. They say they train us. They don't train us. Nobody does it. It's a more powerful message.
Yeah, you're absolutely, and it all comes down to your culture, the culture of the organization. And do people truly live the values? And the only way to know that is, are they exhibiting the behaviors that you say our values are about? And so many organizations, they come up with a list of values, but you don't see any evidence other than the list. You don't see any evidence.
Yes. Well,
it should be where you can watch what people are doing and say, okay, this is a value, this is a value, this is a value, because everybody's doing these things.
And sometimes it's really tragic because they have the list plastered everywhere. Yeah. And it becomes like a joke because all the employees know that nobody's doing that stuff, and it becomes like water cooler jokes and about the list.
And then a new initiative comes along, and everybody's just like, wait it out, just wait it out. It'll go away like last year's initiative.
Yeah, that's why it's important. Each and every initiative, if you start it, you have to go with it to the end and really implement it.
And when it's not working, how you handle that, because every initiative has a moment where, okay, this is going to see, now we'll see how committed you really are to this, because now it feels like it's not working.
And also, as the leaders, especially the people that promoted the initiative, if you realize that it's not good for the organization, you have to have the tough conversation, huddling everybody up, say like, it's not working, we're not getting the results or we're wanting, you're working really hard at implementing it, but we were wrong. So what can we do to fix it? Yes, what can we do to fix it?
Versus abandoning everything. Just saying, that didn't work, because then you keep starting over from the same place. Versus, incremental, improvements where, okay, we get to this point, it's not working. Okay, what can we do? And then you go up a little bit more, and then you keep going up. Versus, all right, that didn't work. So, I told you it wasn't going to work.
And there's no chance of doing something and it has like the book description impact on the business. Like it's like, oh my God, it's really transformed it flawlessly without any effort, anything. Everybody embraced it. It works. No, it's a lot of discussions and
Yeah,
encouragements and readjustments and all. And you have to do it if you really want to get to that next level. You have to do the work.
yeah, you're right on. You're right on. Yeah.
And with that, Dennis, I'm really curious. What is your leadership philosophy?
Can I share a story that really
Yes.
that my
Yeah.
my leadership philosophy? When
Yes.
this goes back to Disney, and I was promoted into my first management position, and this was the best job title I've ever had. I was the supervisor of Fantasyland. You know, I mean,
Oh my
that's
God.
a
Yes.
title. You know, supervisor of Fantasyland. And I was getting ready to give my very first official reprimand to a cast member who there was an attendance problem that this guy had. And that was always one of my pet peeves was attendance issues anyway. And so I was getting ready to give the reprimand, and he was going to come up to our offices. And my boss, my manager, a gentleman by the name of Bruce Fox, he said, "So you're getting ready to give your first reprimand?" And I was kind of kidding, but half serious. I said, "Yeah, I'm going to let him have it. I'm going to let him have it." You know, because I was excited. Because I was finally giving a reprimand rather than getting a reprimand. You know,
Yes.
so I was kind of excited about it.
My
And
turn to give them.
yeah, it was much better this way. And he sat down and he said something that changed my leadership style from that moment. He sat down and said, "Dennis, whatever you have to do as a leader, if you have to reprimand somebody, even if you have to fire somebody, when they walk out the door, you make sure they walk out with their dignity." And
Yes.
that is a moment frozen in time for me. And not just because Bruce said that, but because he lived it too. The way he treated anybody in any circumstance, whatever he had to do, he was so respectful. And so when I look at what I hope my leadership style has been, and I know I don't get it right all the time, but
Nobody
from that
does.
moment forward is respect, to demonstrate respect for the team, demonstrate respect for other departments, you know, whatever it may be. That's what I've tried to live up to that standard that Bruce stated in that moment in 1982. That's frozen in time for me.
Yes, and it's hard. It's hard to do, and I understand like the
Mm-hmm.
importance of this. And for me, it goes back to being professional. This is something that I said like, if you go to work at the job, you have to be a professional, not come with emotional or attack other people's personally, or yourself taking your own personal problems and making it worse for people at the
Yeah.
office. It's hard to do because
Mm-hmm.
you're a human being. You have all kinds of situations that appear during a year or a lifetime. So it's not something easy, but striving to be as professional as possible and not relate with the other people. You know,
Yeah.
you have to be also friends, but especially when you're talking about reprimands and stuff like this, you have to be super professional about it.
Yeah.
And I say
Yeah.
like, because you are drinking, that's why it's impacting all this, or especially
Yeah.
or something attacking their personality and not their
Right.
professionalism.
It's about correcting the behavior and not attacking
Yes.
the person. And so when you look back, you know, and I know this is true for me, when I look back at role models for me, that's one of the traits that's there, is that they respect people. They, through their behaviors, they
Yes.
do. And you made a good point earlier. We have to be conscious of it, because sometimes in the back of our mind, we do respect this person, but our actions aren't demonstrating it for whatever reason. We're in a
Yes.
hurry. We've got a bunch of things on our minds, and so we're not thinking about it. And that's why I think it's important, again, as leaders, that we've got to be very conscious of what our actions are saying to people. Tom Peters, the business writer, Tom Peters, had a great quote that I heard. I heard in a speech one time. He said, "The problem isn't that your people don't know what you're doing. The problem is your people do know what you're doing."
Oh, yes, that's the
They're
big
watching.
problem.
Yeah, they're watching. And so that's the thing is intent is one thing, but behaviors are something that we have to make sure our behaviors follow the intent. And again, that's one of the things that I learned from Bruce.
Yes, and it's something, sometimes I find it strange. People tend to forget how they were when they were like in more of production position and not
Right.
in management. And they forget that people, they knew a lot about managers and they were actually scrutinizing their managers and discussing with their colleagues everything that they were doing and impressions. And if somebody got a feeling or are feeling that bonuses because the company is going well, we're going to get bonuses because I saw this manager doing this and this, or so there's always this constant conversation among the all the employees about their superiors.
Yeah.
And they know a lot. They know more about.
They sure do. They sure do. And again, it goes like that Tom Peters quote is they know what we value because they're watching what we do.
And I think if you would get like 10 people working under a manager together, they could probably form a better psychological profile of the person than a psychologist itself.
Probably right. They could probably save a lot of money on tests and so forth. Yeah.
And now thinking about this, like people that are in production and they want to move to management, hopefully they're not going to forget. What would be your top 3 leadership tips for aspiring leaders?
Well, my focus is, what I do is I focus on customer experience. So my business, that's what I help companies that want to improve the customer experience. So what I would say is for aspiring leaders, and really leaders at any level, is to, number one, be very, very clear on what the customer experience is supposed to be. Be crisp. Nobody's going to be more clear about that than the leader, whether it's the top person in the organization, a department leader, whatever position, leadership position there. What do we want the customer experience to be? It starts with that. The second thing then is, are we hiring people that are wired to deliver that experience? Are we hiring the right people? If we're going to spend our time anywhere, hiring the right people is a pretty good place to spend time, because everything is either easier or harder based on that hiring decision. We've all hired the wrong person at some point, and things become very difficult when you've hired the wrong person. We've all hired wonderful people who said, how did I do that? I would love to clone this person, if I could just clone this. So time spent in making sure, and Disney's very focused on the hiring process. So they call it the casting process, because they want you to know that you're being cast for a role in the show. So spend time hiring. Third thing is that I think for any leader is we need to look at ourselves as trainers and communicators. We need to train and communicate relentlessly to keep that message in front of our people of what that experience is supposed to be. Remember I talked earlier about Valerie's vision, and how that was just such power. So as leaders, whether we're talking about onboarding new people, ongoing training, rallies that we have, the Zoom meetings that we have, are we reinforcing that culture? And the word I like to use is we need to be relentless about it. So when I look at 3 things that I think, for an aspiring leader or any leader, is being crystal clear on what that customer experience is supposed to be, making sure we're bringing people into our organization that are wired to deliver that experience, and then training and communicating relentlessly. We can't assume that people just get it. We've got to keep that message in front of people all the time. One of the questions that I get asked a lot when people find that I worked at Disney, they'll say, how long is the training? That's one of the most common questions I get is, how long is the training?
As long as you work there.
As long as you work there, because you're surrounded by messages of what the experience is supposed to be all about.
And that's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And talking about customer experience, I also feel that if you work in a supporting department, your customers are the other departments inside the business.
Absolutely.
And this goes really true. This goes really for IT, because they usually are in a support. And you have to make sure that you're offering a really great experience and everybody enjoys working with the tech department.
Yeah. And I've had people say, I don't deal with customers. Like let's say an IT person, I don't deal with customers. Certainly you deal with customers. Your customer is the person you're providing a service to. It just happens to be somebody in the organization. But if you don't have a customer, you don't have a job. Your job wouldn't exist. If you weren't serving somebody, your job would not exist. So it's the same principles apply regardless of whether we're serving an internal or an external customer. Customers want you to be good at what you do, right? They want you to be efficient. They want you to be easy to work with. And I want you to be nice to me. Really. And it doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter if it's an internal or an external customer. I want you to do what you said you were going to do. I want you to be efficient doing it, and I want you to be nice to me. If we all did those three things, the world would be a wonderful place.
Oh, yes. And Dennis, since you are such an expert on customer experience, would you have some tips or a crib sheet for leaders that they can use to improve their customer experience? What would be your top tip or advice?
Well, it's, when I work with organizations, one of the first activities that I will help them through a company that's trying to make a shift in their service culture is I'll say, what are the three things that you would want your customers to say about their experience? Okay, what are the three things that you want? Because that makes you really focus on your brand, all right? And you can do that for a department too. Let's say you're the leader of an IT department in a company. What are the three things that we would want our customers to say about their experience with us? And then, because again, that really makes, having to focus on three really makes you focus on your brand. And then the next part of the discussion is, so what has to happen in order for our customers to say those three things about us? And that's where you really start getting into some of the behavioral aspects of it. So at Disney, if they want people to say, they want guests to say they paid attention to every detail. Okay, so what has to happen then if we want our guests to say that? Well, as cast members, then if I see a piece of trash on the ground, I guess that means I need to go over and pick it up and throw it away. It all just kind of, comes into play. And then, so that is the first part of the crib sheet. And then the second part of the crib sheet is, okay, we need to make sure we're hiring people that are wired to do those behaviors.
Yes.
We need to train and communicate relentlessly around it. So it's, it's not rocket science, is it? It's pretty,
no, it's not.
All of it is pretty basic, but you have to do it consciously, because we're so busy. We're all so busy. There's so many things on our plate. There's so many demands that we really have to, make a conscious effort to do some of these basic things and, put them on the calendar, put them on I'm going to be out in as a manager in the parks. I'm going to be out in the parks, and these are the things I'm going to be looking for, and I'm going to make sure I'm recognizing people for doing a great job. It all comes down to we've got to make sure that we're living the values consciously.
And I think it's more like the example of picking up a piece of trash and moving it. It's more like a micro behavior that you can have the opportunity to do it more often. So you're constantly reinforcing the more macro behaviors, let's say,
Yeah.
that you also want to get.
So you think about an IT department, and one of the things that happens oftentimes is the customer side of things. I don't understand what the IT department does. Okay, it's confusing
a
to me.
common problem.
All I know that is either the technology is working or it's not working. Okay, that's the extent of my knowledge. Okay, that's the extent of my knowledge. And an IT department that wants, let's say that one of the things they want their customers to say is they were easy to do business with. Okay, they were easy to do business. Well, that means then not talking in jargon that your customer is not going to understand, to explain what you're going to do and how it's going to work, to treat people with respect and make sure that you understand that this is a challenging situation for them. It's, again, the behaviors just kind of fall into place when you've defined what the experience is supposed to be.
Yeah, and sometimes it's hard, like especially simplifying your language, because you invested a lot of time and energy to learn all that jargon.
Yeah,
and then you want to use it because
you want to use it, but use it with your colleagues. Use it with your colleagues. But I used to say, it's funny, when I used to talk to technology folks, when I would have a tech issue at a Disney, I used to say, feel free to talk to me like I'm 5 years old. Okay. You can't say that anymore because 5-year-olds are so technologically savvy now.
Yes.
I would say, talk to me like you would explain this to your grandfather. So.
Yeah, but that's something, and even I find it, even like tech people, they appreciate it more when you can explain complex ideas in using regular conversational and not being all jargon and everything, because nobody wants to be there with a dictionary or searching or after the conversation, searching what the hell did he say to me, because
and what ends up happening is then I need to contact you again because I really didn't understand what happened. So now you go through the whole cycle again, and so I call this, when I'm doing training, I call it looking through the lens of the customer. And that includes the terminology that where's your customer coming from, and seeing the experience through their lens.
If you use just one term that the customer or another person does not understand, then they're going to think about it and try to solve it, and they don't hear anything about the rest of the stuff you're saying.
You're right on. You're absolutely right. Yeah.
Dennis, looking like you have like an impressive library, so I'm really curious. What is the book that had the most profound impact on you?
Yeah, I love to. I mean, that's, again, one of my great pleasures in life is reading. I think from a business book, it came out, I think, in the 1990s, but every bit of it is relevant today. It's a book called First Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. First Break All the Rules. He was with Gallup, the Gallup organization. And that book really sort of launched a lot of different elements of the Gallup. Or I don't know if you're familiar with the Gallup Q12. I don't know. It's all about employee engagement. Okay, how do you create intense employee engagement? And there's 12 questions that if employees in an organization respond positively to these 12 questions, you're going to have an engaged workplace. And this was the first book that really brought this out and kind of, I don't want to say it launched the employee engagement field, but it was early on. So that's one of the books that I always recommend to leaders. I've got that book I've got highlights all through it. And I still go back to it. And think, yeah, that is just such a powerful message. The world has evolved obviously since then, but the principles that are discussed in the book are timeless. So that's probably my all-time favorite business book.
And it goes into the 12 questions and discusses them.
Yeah. It goes into, do you feel respected? Are your ideas valued? Things like that.
Yeah, so it goes through all of them.
There's 12 of them. And again, the more of them that your people can answer positively, the greater the likelihood you're going to have an engaged workforce. And it's all research based. That's the other thing I love about it, is it wasn't Marcus Buckingham's opinion of all of this. It was based on years of data that the Gallup organization had been gathering. So it is all research based. It's not an opinion.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And since this is, like you stressed, it's the business book, what would be the personal book? So that's not a business book that's really impacted you.
Oh, okay. My favorite personal business book, or personal book, I mean?
Yeah,
I think
personal book.
My new favorite book, just as a book, is A Gentleman in Moscow. And I'm trying to remember the author's first name. His last name is Towles, Towles. And it's about a gentleman who is sentenced to stay in this hotel in Moscow. He did say,
Okay.
you have to read the book, but the court said you will spend the rest of your life under house arrest in this hotel. And so the whole Russian history plays out from his perspective of his time in this hotel.
In the hotel.
It's fascinating, and it's wonderfully written. A Gentleman in Moscow. I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Towles. It's just one of my favorite personal books.
Sounds amazing. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah.
And Dennis, if people want to find out more about you, where should they go?
The best way to reach out is through my website, which is www.snowassociates.com. So www.snowassociates.com. That's where we have information about, my speaking and training and virtual programs and so forth. But we also we use that as the hub for everything. My blog, video, links to videos that I've created that people can take a look at, downloads, information about my books. All of those things are there. So we use that as the hub for everything. But in my email and all of that is there. I'm always happy to interact with folks if they have questions or comments. I hope it comes across that I love talking about these things.
It comes across. And
Good, thank you.
And Dennis, I'm recommending people to check out the website and reach out to you and to find out more. And I especially recommend them to check out your books. Probably they are on Amazon, or they're going to find them on your website where to get them. Yep. Yeah. It's been a true pleasure talking with you, Dennis.
Well,
Thank you so much.
You've been a wonderful interviewer. I really appreciate you ask great questions, and I love the dialogue that we have. So I would welcome the opportunity to do this again in the future.
For sure. Bye.
All right. Thank you so much.
That was today's episode. Tune in daily. Rate, like, subscribe, and share, please. Oh, you can find further info and materials in the show notes on techyleadership.com, including links to the guest book recommendations.